it. That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
People still believe in higher education, but they don't always see what colleges do for them. Curious why? Me too. Welcome to Pulse Check, the Reputation Rethink, a 5-part series from Ologie. I'm your host, Kibilds, Vice President of Strategy at Ologie, the branding and marketing agency for organizations with missions that matter. In this series, we'll pull the curtain back on our new national study to surface the disconnects shaping higher ed's reputation. We'll hear from experts who are acting on these insights and give you the tools to start shifting reputation through smarter strategy and storytelling. Now, let's get to today's episode. Welcome, listeners. I'm your host, Kibilds, and today I'm joined by my colleagues Doug Edwards and Dr. Cassie Dutton. Doug and Cassie are here to introduce the Reputation Rethink study and preview the insights we'll be unpacking over the next 4 episodes. Doug is Chief Strategy Officer at Ologie, where he leads the strategy and research teams to uncover deep insights and turn them into powerful creative work. Cassie is Research Director at Ologie. She designs and leads custom research for our clients, drawing on her expertise in both consumer and academic research. Doug, Cassie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here. It is currently -7 degrees as we record this outside. So I'm hoping this will warm me up a little bit.
We'll be nice and cozy in here. Don't worry, Doug.
Thanks so much, Day. It's so great to be here. I'm so excited about all the things that we learned, and I can't wait to talk more about it.
Me too. I'm really excited to share this with folks listening. But before we dive into the study, I want to start with a question for each of you so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Cassie, let's start with you. Can you tell us a bit about your academic research?
Oh my God, that is like a very dangerous question to ask someone who just finished their dissertation. So I'll try not to go off on too much of a tangent, but really my academic research focuses on sort of the intersection of 2 stories that are really important, especially in the United States and even more so now given our current political climate. First, the experiences of immigrants living in the United States, and then sort of intersecting the impact of state-level policy on that lived experience. Spoiler alert, policy matters and really directly impacts socioeconomic outcomes for both immigrants and non-immigrants living in the U.S.
I feel like we have to do a whole episode on just that topic, Cassie. Maybe a whole series.
Oh my gosh. Do not give me a platform. I will talk endlessly about it.
Maybe we will give you a platform, girl. It sounds amazing. Now, Doug, here's your question. What's a lesson from your early work in higher ed that you still find yourself returning to today?
I feel like I learn a new lesson every day. That's very cliche to say, but I do. That's why I love this industry. One thing that really sticks out to me, though, a colleague of mine that said quite a long time ago, we were talking about the value higher ed contributes and talking about how a U.S. education system is in many ways kind of thought of as the best in the world, right? We're sought after and respected globally. An American degree is kind of held up to a higher standard, the idea of the engine of upward mobility and access and the promise of everything. But at the same time, while all of those can be true for many people, we also kind of agree that higher ed is the worst in the United States. It's getting very expensive. In some ways, it has become quite exclusive, and there's some prestige that is wrapped up in that. And perhaps, the narrative of being out of touch or too inward looking at times. And so it's this dual reality that we live with, but it's really exciting to me. It's fun to kind of operate in that messy middle of that. And it's what keeps me, fighting for this industry, because I love it. I think it does so much more good for the world than it does anything else.
I mean, a strategist loves the contradiction, right? So
very true. The tension. Find the tension.
Find the tension. We're right in the middle of it. All right, team. Are you ready to dive into the study?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Go. All right. So the reputation of higher education is in the news quite a bit. You just talked about that a little bit, Doug. What inspired you to do a study about reputation? And what were you trying to learn that is different than what we hear in the news every day?
To the lesson of tension, right? Find the tension. Reputation, it can mean different things. When we say reputation in the context of this study, we're talking about the dominant narrative that has showed up in the media, the political weaponization of higher education, the general public perception that has kind of unfolded the past 3 to 5 years. And so there's always been this public debate that I mentioned that challenges the practices of higher ed. And I think in some ways that's healthy, a very respectful debate that is normal and actually what higher ed is kind of built to be all about, respectful, healthy, open exchange of ideas. But recently, that debate in the public sphere has taken a more destructive and unproductive tone. Is college worth it? You hear and read about the declining trust and confidence in institutions of all types to which higher ed is subject to, program cuts and layoffs or mergers and closures. You hear about the governmental interventions with research and how funding is distributed, the dismantling of DEI initiatives and campus safety and protests on campus. And so with all of these things, the problem is that that's what shapes the narrative. And it's been a very challenging narrative lately. And that narrative tends to isolate, 50 or so, maybe even fewer institutions. And that's what's tough for me, because the reality is that there are over 4,000 institutions in the US today, and many of them get left out of that narrative or not represented or misrepresented. So when we think about the collective role that we all play deep in the communities and pockets of the country, it's an invaluable role and in many ways beyond measure. So we wanted to try to measure it. In one hand, the narrative is kind of drawn from the 1%, which is fitting in some ways. But the big question we were exploring is, how salient is this narrative? We're all reading it. We all see it in our inboxes. We get a new chapter delivered every day from multiple sources. And so does this accurately reflect the way that people really feel? And if so, is there anything that we can do about it? We are marketers. We want to shape that narrative. We want to craft perceptions so that it aligns with reality. And that's what we were really seeking to do. And so you asked also, how different is this from what we hear about today? And this was very, very important to us because we didn't want to do a study or conduct research that was just contributing to the abundance of information we're all reading about already. And so we wanted to make sure this was different and adding value or a new perspective to that conversation. And so what this wasn't about was about trust or confidence of institutions, which is a generational view that is well researched towards institutions. This wasn't about the choice of going to college or not. This is heavily researched by every higher ed agency or research firm. And so the decision of choosing or not choosing to go to college is very focused on prospective student mindset as well. And so this wasn't about the value of a degree, which will forever be challenged and rightfully, criticized, because we need to stay ahead of where the world is, and that value needs to keep up with the way the world moves. And so this was really about what people see and what they believe to be true of the colleges and universities that are in their community and in the society that we are all a part of.
I think that's a really important distinction, and I really appreciate how nuanced your explanation was. Like, there is a difference between the value of a degree and the value of a college or university as an institution. So I think the fact that this study is really trying to create that separation and understand what's the value of these institutions and not necessarily the outcomes of a degree isn't, you're correct, very studied. So I'm excited to dive into the results, but before we do, Cassie, can you tell us about the methodology and whose voices are represented and how did you gather the insights from them?
Yeah. So like Doug just said, this isn't a study on the value of a degree or, how people feel like when they're looking into going to college. This is a broader look at public perception and, the way people think about colleges and universities and higher ed as an institution. So with that in mind, this is really a look at those general population perceptions. So this is represented by a broad look at U.S. adults 18 and over. And so we do have representation across gender and race and ethnicity and political affiliation and location because, I want to really emphasize that it was important for us that we have this, broad look, but that we were also really intentional when we were collecting a diverse sample. We wanted to be able to get a sense of that sentiment at a general level for sure, but we also wanted to be able to cut the data in specific ways and see how specific groups were responding to these questions and these thoughts as well. And so we spoke to these groups in a few different ways, through a quantitative survey that was administered online, and then also through a series of focus groups. So that quantitative survey was really facilitated to that Gen Pop audience through an online panel provider. But for the focus groups, which were, I don't want to pick a favorite part, but they were really, really special. They were a little bit more targeted. And so for those groups, we specifically spoke with 4 audiences. So we spoke with younger adults who identified as politically liberal. We spoke with younger adults who identified as politically conservative. And then we spoke with older adults who identified as politically liberal and older adults who identified as politically conservative. So we did this because, as we were just talking about, higher education and colleges and universities are often a political football. And so we wanted to sort of take that variable out of the conversation and not have those focus groups devolve into arguments around different political opinions and things like that. But having the quantitative and the qualitative components were really helpful because it allowed us to have that broader look, but also give us some of those more nuanced details as well.
I bet those focus groups were fun to run.
They were. I love moderating. It is always so fun to get a bunch of people in a room together that have never met, and the things that it really is magic, as cliche as that sounds.
Yeah, I got the privilege of being in some of those with you, and the way people open up, it truly is special to watch. So, can you share with us, Cassie, the types of questions that you asked in the survey and the focus groups?
Yeah, so the survey and the focus groups did follow a similar pattern in the types of questions that we ask, and we structured it in a really interesting and intentional way. So we started first with some of those really basic questions just to get a sense of, what's top of mind for participants, what issues are most important to them, is higher education even at the top of their list when they think about the issues that are most important to them today. And then also getting a sense of their familiarity with the current state of higher education. And then we sort of dug into the heart of the question, and this is really, the current state of higher education. So we asked questions around, what do you think colleges and universities are doing right? What do you think colleges and universities aren't doing so well? We asked questions around, how much colleges and universities are benefiting different groups like students, alumni, the local communities, and things like that. And we also dug in a little bit more to get a sense of how participants felt that colleges and universities were delivering on, metrics that we would consider success for a college or a university, like expanding knowledge or equipping students to succeed in the workforce, and contributing to state and local communities and economies. And then we sort of wrapped up both the conversation in the focus group and the survey with questions that allowed us to think a little bit deeper about the future state, where participants felt like colleges and universities were making an impact, where they would want to see colleges and universities making more of an impact, and what would make them feel that, what would communicate to them that colleges and universities were making an impact in some of these different spaces.
What were some of those findings and insights that came out of the study?
We'll start off on a high note, looking big picture, because it was really encouraging to us. And so the big kind of macro view is overwhelmingly, 77% of the people that we surveyed and spoke with, they believe that colleges and universities provide an important contribution to society. Easy to say, harder when you start to unpack that, but contributions that go beyond just teaching and awarding degrees. And so better than we expected, given what we've been told over the past year about how people feel about higher ed, but this is good. So we're starting, we're warming up. We're starting to get warm. The problem with this, though, the other thing we learned, the other side, the tension, is that they have a hard time seeing it. And when you can't see something, you tend to forget about it, or you misunderstand it, or not fully appreciate it, or even worse, you fear it because you don't know what's really happening there. And so there's an uncertainty or a mystery that is kind of feared. And so when we think about the role of a college or university beyond teaching and awarding degrees, you think about things like community programming, K through 12 enrichment, medical care and medical research that truly saves and extends and changes lives. The athletics that give us all a sense of spirit and camaraderie and someone a shared person to root for, a shared spirit in that. The arts and the entertainment that universities bring and draw and attract, and the talent that comes with that. And so these are the things that are missed a lot of times, or not as heavily promoted. And so the public has a hard time seeing those things. They're not connecting those efforts with the schools that are behind them. So the big picture insight, the big recommendation we have is that we need to make the invisible more visible. People see the signs in the buildings that we all call our campus. They drive past the beautiful buildings and the congested parking lots. They read about coaching contracts and the multi-billion-dollar campaigns that are out there. And so that's the less visible stuff that people forget about. So we could all do a better job of talking about and marketing and promoting those things. And so that way people are not left to imagine what's happening on campus and inside the walls. And so making those connections more visible for people so that they truly understand what all it is that colleges and universities do.
There's that initial part, people feel like colleges and universities make a really important impact, but there's definitely some work to do, because what we also saw, again, that tension, that contrast, is that 8 out of 10 people think that colleges and universities need at least some tweaking. Yeah.
It's the best and it's the worst.
It's
the best and it's the worst.
So, yeah. Okay. And then from those 8 of 10, a quarter of those people say that colleges and universities need a total overhaul. Like, yikes. That's not great. But I think when we drill down and pull that thread even more is, unsurprisingly, we see that some groups feel more strongly than others. So significantly more folks who are conservative leaning in their political ideology say that colleges and universities need that total overhaul, more so than those who are liberal leaning. And significantly more people living in rural communities say that colleges and universities need that total overhaul compared to those in other areas like suburban or urban settings.
It's so brave that you asked this. We're doing great. We could have ended the survey there and just been people think we're awesome. But this is where the magic really happens, right? How can we do something about it? And so did you dig even further? Did you ask them what the things were that needed tweaking?
What we saw is that first and most important one, and this goes back to what Doug was just talking about making things more visible, is making research content easier to consume. And, as someone who, does research for a living, this is something that really is important to me and something that I really resonate with. But what we saw is that people know that research matters. When we ask participants how important colleges and universities are to different areas beyond that just, getting a degree, those contributions to STEM and medical research, really rise to the top. What's more important, I think, is that this opinion is true for pretty much everyone, across political alignments, across regions, socioeconomic status, geographic setting, education. Research matters to everyone. And, we were talking about the magic of those focus groups a little bit earlier. We had one participant say in our group, and he said it so clearly, there is innovative research being done at universities that wouldn't get done if it wasn't being done there. This was a conservative participant. It's very, very much a common knowledge. So while the majority of respondents say that the contributions that colleges and universities make to these research areas is important, only about 2 in 3 think that they're making that significant impact. And we asked our participants, again, pulling on that thread even more, what would make them feel like colleges and universities are providing more of an impact when it comes to this area of the contributions that colleges and universities make that is so important. And we heard a lot of really interesting and thoughtful responses, but what it really boils down to is that people want fewer studies and more stories. And what this really looks like at its core is just plain, relatable language that connects to real impact, is publicly visible, like we were just talking about, and is really easy to consume and connects with people at the core.
Wow. Not more studies. Yes, more stories.
Right, exactly.
That's
it's
our
that
job.
Simple.
Yeah. That's the marketer and communicator's job out there, listeners. You have a task.
And I think, in so many ways, we're already seeing this start to happen in the industry. I think we saw it early on. Harvard kind of stood research up as the front door to the university's webpage, and being kind of that bold declaration of research matters kind of gave permission to the industry to follow suit. And so since then, I would say that was probably March or April of last year. Since then, we've seen a handful of large research universities putting research stories and research storytelling at the forefront of their branding and marketing efforts. So even going so far as to have dedicated research campaigns to connect their work with the day-to-day impact that it has in the lives of people. Another big one, and no surprise, we all know this one was coming, but it's the money, right? The money feels mysterious. Colleges bring in a lot of money, they spend a lot of money, and much of which we all know goes directly to the student in the form of scholarships and the student experience, technology, and facilities that enhance the student learning or research experience. And I'm not sure people understand all that goes into that. And so there's an opportunity there. What I want to focus on is that only 40% of the population agrees that taxpayer dollars are allocated to areas that they care most about. So the inverse of that, it leaves 60% of the population to disagree or feel neutral. And so again, I always find opportunities. What's the opportunity in that? So it's easy to understand why, right? If we focus on a few of the things that contribute to that, for most institutions, our funding comes from a variety of sources. We have very complex business models and revenue sources: tuition, state and federal funds, philanthropic donations, corporate partnerships, research grants, etc. If you look at the student experience coming in, terminology involved in the college search process is very intricate, very precise, and it's subject to personal circumstance. So every financial aid package is based on you and you alone. So no shared experience really happens there that people can talk openly about. And it's finances, right? It's very personal. You don't want to divulge that beyond your immediate personal family. And so you can understand some of the skepticism. You also see coaching contracts and these mega billion-dollar campaigns, constant construction on campus. So people are wondering, where is this money going? And is it going into that? Because I don't see your priorities represented here. So we asked, where do you think the money should go? What can we do a better job of conveying to you to show you that our priorities are what they really are? And so the two things people said: jobs, right? They want to see relevant education for careers that are in high demand fields. And we connect this often with ROI, right? They also want to see community impact. So we're here, we're your neighbors, we support you, whether you believe us or not. We want the visible benefits right here in our own backyard, in our shared space of this earth. We want to see your impact right here in our community. And so the opportunity is to kind of show where this money comes from and where it goes. How marketers can help here. I think this is very complicated to do well, but it makes a big difference when you can pull it off. And I think visuals and infographics and animations break this down. I think we as marketers can take a lesson from the financial sector that explains stocks and investment portfolios and ETFs and all of that. They do a great job at explaining how all of that complex financial flow works. And I think we can borrow some of that in our marketing for higher ed.
Given what we've just talked about with like making research more accessible and, concerns about money, is being more visible to the local community. So, colleges and universities really like to focus on this national and global impact, but it leaves folks and communities in the direct sort of vicinity being like, okay, cool, but what about us? Like, how is this helping us? Like, what does this do for us? And so when we ask participants, how much, if at all, do you think colleges and universities currently benefit the local community? About half of people say there's some to no benefit from their local institutions. It's really sad to hear that. And this is really particularly noticeable at larger research, like R1 institutions. And that makes sense, right? Because these are institutions that are often, vying to increase their global reputations because they're competing for funding and they're competing for talent. And we know that competition is getting more and more intense every year. But what people generally want is to see their local colleges and universities in their everyday lives. And we sort of touched on this a little bit earlier, but this can look like educational camps, basketball camps, and even something as simple as like making campus a welcoming space, both for like community learning and like recreation stuff, like, hosting community lectures or learning opportunities, opening up access to libraries and other like rec facilities and stuff like that. And it can also look like giving back to the local community. This could be like prioritizing local vendors for campus events or being a real vocal support for local projects and causes. So there's so many ways and so many shapes and so many forms that this could take. But in the end, when you're trying to build that connection and show that connection to your local community, it really has to feel authentic to your institution and your community. So it's not something that we can just be like, oh, here's the blueprint for this. It's like, okay, you have to like figure out what makes sense in your individual experience.
You saying that reminded me of an interesting story. I was working on campus just a day that I wanted to be somewhere else, not in my home office. And I went to the campus of my local university and I posted on Instagram, I'm working from the new building. It's so nice. And somebody replied, can you do that? Like, what affiliation do you have? Can you just walk in? I'm like, yeah, the doors are unlocked. The Wi-Fi, okay, I was definitely stealing Wi-Fi from using my husband's account. Don't tell anyone. But yeah, you can just walk in. You actually truly can. And you can go to the library and grab a book and read it. And you don't need permission. You don't need authorization. And I just don't think people realize that these facilities are theirs as well.
Okay, so we've got two more for you. This one is for all the alumni-oriented folks out there, because people are wanting colleges and universities to put more work into supporting their alumni. So if you think about this, in any other business, we would think of our current customers as the most valued, most precious audience that we serve. The lifetime customer value of a college graduate in particular is massive, and it only grows over time. And so why, on so many levels, does it feel like they are an afterthought? And that's what we're seeing in the research here. Graduating from a college or university comes with the promise of an irrevocable advantage for you, not only in your first job and in your first career search, but throughout your career, you have that advantage that has been baked into you from the beginning. And so, fairly or not, many people define ROI as landing a job with as little debt as possible. And over the past decade, tuition costs have increased on average 19% at public and 42% at private universities. And with that, the average debt has increased. It's up 36%. And this is happening alongside inflation, which is up 33%, and home prices up 47%. So everything is getting more expensive over the past decade, except for our wages. They are not growing at the same pace. So what alumni are making is not keeping up with the cost of living. And lastly, the job market for these folks, that's if you're employed, right? So the job market for unemployed folks has not been very kind, especially to recent college graduates of the past couple of years. Within the past decade, computer engineering, computer science, information systems, these were all very high demand, high growth fields that had a lot of degree pursuit, a lot of candidates seeking these degrees. And as they entered their career, now 2, 3, 5 years in, these are 3 of the top 10 fields with the highest unemployment rates. So anyone who entered those degrees thinking they've got a great career outlook now face, early to mid-career, and they've been laid off, or they can't find new jobs, or they're having a tough time switching. And so the math ain't math in here, right? You can understand why graduates are feeling a bit underserved, and they're paying more tuition, they're graduating with more debt, and they're struggling to find a job or have a job that keeps up with what it costs to live in the world today. For alumni, the opportunity is to kind of make these connections before they graduate and stay connected throughout their career, and treat them as the high value audience that they really are. Make it easier for them to connect with other alumni, those who are hiring and mentoring, create and share career content that's practical and current, keeping your resume up to date with AI search in the HR process.
That's so interesting, because when we work with alumni audiences, right, oftentimes what universities want to do is provide value through engagement, nostalgia, affinity. But is that actually delivering value to some of these recent college grads, right? There has to be a value exchange. So what are we giving them that's actually tangible before we're asking them for their time and money? And I think that's a really important reframe for advancement marketing communication teams, who it's not just about getting them to come to an event or, donating during your giving day. What are we actually giving them that is helping them in their careers, their entire lifetime as professionals? I think this is a really revealing insight to support some initiatives in that regard. All right, Cassie, last but not least.
This last one is a little tricky. It's this idea that colleges and universities need to be places for ideas, not ideologies. So what this ultimately means is that regardless of political affiliation, the majority of people really agree that colleges and universities should remain free of political ideology, both in the classroom and in the administration. Both sides of the political spectrum want campuses to be defined not by ideology, not by politics, but by critical thinking and curiosity and conversation. We heard a lot from people this feeling that, universities aren't feeling neutral anymore. And there's like a desire for colleges to focus on teaching critical thinking and allowing sort of those spaces for conversation to exist. Now, I'll caveat this by saying that this is a really nuanced finding because there are obviously times when beliefs and ideologies can be harmful. Like, I'm really glad that we're going to have some wonderful guests in a future episode that will talk a bit more about what this can look like in practice, even through all of the messy and all of the complex of what we're saying this desire is. But okay, so what does that look like in practice?
Yeah. And I think that's actually where the work happens. So that would be, I think, the final episode of our series where we'll really unpack what that can look like in order to not just actually make it happen on your campuses, but to let students know, prospective students and families, that this is truly a space for open dialogue. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to summarize all of the findings that you shared. First of all, the public knows that higher education institutions, colleges, and universities contribute to society beyond educating students. That's great. But they also think we need some tweaking. And when we dug into what that tweaking was about, what they would like are more research stories. How does research connect to my day-to-day life? They want to understand where the money comes from and where the money goes and how universities are using the money in a way that aligns with what they care about in society. They also are feeling kind of neglected about their local campuses. Those folks around the institutions in the local neighborhoods and the local regions are kind of like, hey, we're here. You are focusing on national reputation, but we kind of want to hang out. Then we're also looking at alumni and how alumni are feeling about their alma maters and the support, especially as they're navigating a really difficult labor market. And lastly, that all across the board, people really want universities to be places for safe and open dialogue. And I think that's where really we learn to live and work and exist and be happy together if the university can find a way to safely enable and teach that. How'd I do?
Yeah, spot on. That's exactly it.
Amazing. All right. Well, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners today before we wrap up?
We shared a little bit today about all these really great insights and all the things that we learned, but it's really just scratching the surface. There's so much more detail and nuance that this study really dives into. So I would recommend, if you're interested to learn even more, the report for this study is available and you can download it at ologie.com/research.
We had so much fun playing around with this data, and I know that's not for everyone, but we always want our research to be useful. And so we work it at Ologie. We work it and work it and work it until it's useful for marketers to take action against. And so in the report, there's a lot of suggestions that our full team here put our brains around on what you can do next. And these don't require big budgets or complicated marketing plans. These are kind of everyday tactics that are small tweaks, easy to pull off, and you can do them right now. And so if we all do one of these things collectively, imagine the difference, right? And then next year we do another and then another. So
I love that. Download the report and look at the tips, because that's what I really like about this. Like, you can put out a research report that shares what people are thinking, but I think this one goes a step further to give suggestions on what marketers and communicators can do. And this podcast series goes even further, bringing in some guests from across the industry to share examples of exactly how they are already doing some of those things. So listeners, stay tuned for the next 4 episodes. We'll dive deeper into each of the specific insights that Doug and Cassie shared today about research, money, your local community, your alumni, and ideology on your campus. And in those episodes, we'll really talk about what exactly you can do about it. We hope you follow along, and I'll see you at the next one.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.